Muhammad Jamal. I'm from Jerusalem. I study computer science at State University. I'm in my second year, and
I'm glad you guys all came today. I'm Noor Hamoudeh.
Here, no, use the microphone.
Hello?
Oh no.
That I know how to make work. Just get.
No. Maybe. Oh,
Okay, this should be working. This worked earlier. Oh boy. Okay.
So you drop it. You drop it. That's all.
Just be louder. Hi. This is really loud. I'm Noor Hamoudeh. I'm a nutrition student at...
Oh.
What?
Sorry.
Really?
It's working.
Yeah. I'm a second year nutrition student at State University. I live in the Ramallah, but I'm originally from a village from the 1948 villages called Lifta, and I'm really happy to be here today. When do we get started?
Well, I guess I'll use this time because we're not talking about the presentation. Can everyone hear me?
If you use the microphone.
Okay, is this good?
Lift that up.
So we're going to talk about the right to education. We're here as a movement from State University, but as well as other Palestinian universities. We're going to talk about the right to education movement. Why do we need our right to education? How is it being taken away from us, and what we're doing and what we're asking you to do. But since this presentation is going to be more about education, I thought until we get all of this done, maybe we can open the presentation for more personal aspect about the occupation from my and Noor's personal aspect, more than only education. So I'll tell you a bit about myself. I was born in Jerusalem, but my father wasn't. My father was from the West Bank, technically from the West Bank, and my mother was from Jerusalem. And so when they married, they had to relocate into my father's village and live there for 8 years until my father got his Israeli refugee ID, which gives him the chance to live in Jerusalem and not let my mother lose her ID, because it's if you don't live in Jerusalem, you basically lose your ID. And so after 8 years, my parents relocated back to Jerusalem. But the thing is, my father was born a sibling of 8 and an orphan, because my grandfather died 5 months before he was born. And so my father's relationship with my family was really close. And being prohibited from seeing them every day, to check on them every day to see what's the news, that really affected him. And so he prepared us every week to go and visit them, to go see my grandmother, to go see my uncles, to sit there for a couple of hours just hearing news, seeing my family in the West Bank, because they weren't allowed to come and see us in Jerusalem. And every week we'd go to a village called Beit Surik, which is near Jerusalem. And the thing is about that, when you have a weekly visit, but you live in an occupied country, you don't get to go through the same route in the years to come. So I had to go through 3 generations of checkpoints. And you'd think with the future and everything, you'd say our cause, it's getting better, it's getting more improvements. Israel wants peace and whatever you hear in the news, but it's the other way around. Because before 2005, we went to the village to a route that would take us from Jerusalem to the village to one checkpoint and one village, and it was like 15 minutes for like 3 to 5 miles. That's nothing. But then they closed that village because they built another settlement near that checkpoint, and for the protection of that settlement security, they had to reroute that whole checkpoint for Palestinians to reach their villages because of their security. And so it took us 30 minutes. I mean, like 30 minutes, it's okay. You can reach school in that time here. You wait in traffic for 30 minutes. It's nothing, but the problem is they even made it worse. They built the apartheid wall to protect themselves again. And so the whole route changed from Jerusalem directly to that village, going through a couple villages, to going through cities and towns to reach that village. And became a whole trip, like a trip, an actual trip. You'd go with your family. You know, like here you'd go with your family on a weekend trip. You'd go see a park, you'd stay in the park. There, we'd stay like 2 hours in the car, through the traffic, in one of the most infamous checkpoints in this territory, in the occupied territories, called Karandia. And I hope, like, for you guys to learn more about those who don't know, because Palestine, it's one of the main routes to the West Bank, and one of the main sources for Israel to pressure the Palestinian people. And it would take us about 2 hours to reach our village, and 2 hours to come back. And during these 2 hours we'd meet our family, but that would take a whole day. And it becomes more of a punishment for a kid. It becomes like, yeah, you need to prepare yourself, you need to cancel everything on that day just so you could visit your grandmother, so you could visit your uncles, aunts. It didn't become like a 2 hours visit. You'd see them, you'd say hi, you'd listen to the news. It became more of a punishment before seeing them and after seeing them. And as a kid, that drove me away from my family, but you have to stay, you have to fight, you have to go, because that's what Israel wants from us. They want us to drive us away from our families. They don't want us to visit them. They don't want us to go back to our roots. That's a story not related to education, but related to occupation, and it's still not working. So, do you want to talk about like anything?
Hi again. My situation is not as direct as Mohammed's because I don't usually have to go through checkpoints every day. But I wasn't born in Palestine. I was actually born in Florida, and we moved back to Ramallah when I was 10. But Ramallah wasn't actually my hometown, and knowing that from my grandparents and all, it was actually pure luck that my grandparents moved to Ramallah, because during 1948, if they moved to a village near Ramallah, me and every individual in my family would end up having no identity whatsoever. An example of this are like the Bedouins who live in Area C in the West Bank. And thankfully, my grandparents were lucky enough to move to a city, and I was allowed for an education. But however, as a nutrition student, I have a problem in the future because, well, an indirect problem, because my government is very, very dependent on other aids from other countries, and they don't have enough cash flow for like the main essentials for human beings in the country. So our Ramallah hospitals have like a high level of understaffing, and by that I mean there are no nutritionists, no dietitians in these hospitals. So unfortunately, when I have to train and when I do my training in order to start my career, I have to go through an hour-and-a-half detour to Jerusalem, and the hour-and-a-half detour you may not think is a problem, because I know you guys all probably go to large cities and take hours to go from one place to another, but I'm talking about a country that's smaller than the state of Delaware and consists of 700 roadblocks and checkpoints and heavy security checkpoints. And unfortunately, I have to go through such a thing just so I can have a decent training and a decent education in order for me to have a good career. But even after I graduate, there's a 34% chance as a female in the country that I might not have a job. That there's a really high percentage that I will be unemployed, and there's an even higher percentage that I'm going to end up looking for some random job in Ramallah just because I want to stay and help the economy. But unfortunately, our country is not very independent, and it affects us all as students and as like adults, because we all want to be educated, but it's really, really hard, especially when you want to go into some majors that aren't very available career-wise in our country. So, as I said, it doesn't affect me directly, but indirectly it affects us all. Thank you.
I think I think like what we can do here, because of the unavailability of that the presentator or like the screen, I think what we can do is like present it from the screen here, and we do the like to show you the maps in more in a better form, but
we might not be able, he's running to go check and see if there's a port available, but he's a little ways away, so he's going to have to go there and come back.
And I found a second person that's doing the same thing. So between them, we might, they're finding a dongle, if anybody's interested. Does anybody have a dongle in their pocket? It's a connection between an Apple machine and this. It's a computer thing. It's a strange word.
We do have these little map cards stuff. Do you want to hold it up? In the meantime, while they're sharing their stories, we can pass those out. I'm sure most of us here have seen them, our map cards that we give out. But that might help. It gives a map of the different towns and settlements, and maybe you could reference that, and so you can have a visual in front of you. Would people appreciate if I pass those out? So it's something to look at.
can we get to?
Do you want questions? Or do you want to start?
No, please go ahead.
Well, when I was there a little over a year ago, it didn't seem that there was a security risk. I did not see any potential for violence. I saw peaceful Palestinians trekking through the checkpoints and putting up with oppression.
Yeah.
I saw many armed guards. I just didn't see any potential for violence.
Exactly.
So it's all just there in their mind that they have to protect themselves.
Yeah,
Use the microphone.
In their mind, they believe that.
Use the microphone. Use the
We're the
microphone.
animals and they're humans.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, so they just use walls and they use checkpoints and they use security checks and they use they use multiple ways just to make us feel like we're not as equal as them. And I guess they do this so that we can just keep believing that they're just going to keep pushing us until we stop resisting. And the former Zionists, like the first presidents, first prime ministers of Israel, wanted this. They wanted us to lose hope and stop resisting so that we can actually have a voluntary agreement between us and them, so that we can be friends. Because as they said long ago, that the Palestinians and Israelis will never have a voluntary agreement unless Palestinians realize that they need to lose hope. And unfortunately, that's never going to happen. But at the same time, they think that we're lower than them, so they use these ways to just make us feel like we're not human. So yeah, but we are like mainly most of us are not violent. Yeah, I mean, we don't even have ways to be violent.
Goyim.
It's not possible.
Goyims.
What?
They call you Goyim.
What do they call it?
How's Goyim?
Goyim. Oh yeah.
Goyim.
Goyim. Yeah. Yeah, like
Can I ask a question? Real
Yeah,
fast?
yeah, sure.
You're born in Florida, right?
Yeah, I was born.
Then you're a naturalized citizen of the United States. You have a passport.
Yeah.
Do you?
But I also have an identity, so I'm treated just like them.
But you shouldn't have a problem going back and forth with American passport.
Yeah, I didn't have a problem, but because I have a Hawiya,
Yeah?
the green, West, the identity for West Bank Palestinians, I still have to get a permit to go from Ramallah to Jerusalem and from wherever city to city. Like I'm still checked like anyone else. And the only thing my American passport does for me, thankfully, is like I won't have to get visas for most places.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Yay.
Very good.
Okay, so we're just going to start with the basics of what the Right to Education campaign is, and why we're calling for the right to education, even though as Palestinians we do have an education, but what we're actually calling for is an education without going through constant and continuous interruptions of the Israeli occupation through the process of it. And
so basically, that's why our right to education, why we ask for our right to education, because we believe every Palestinian should have the right to get education without any kind of interruption, as you said. But how is it being how is it being taken away from us? Well, when you're talking about our education in general and the curriculum we've had for the past 100 years, when we were under the Ottoman period, like pre-World War I, we had our curriculum was like our education was till high school, and after high school there's no Arabic education, so you'd have to learn Turkish to get further education. But then under the British mandate, we were given high school education in Arabic, but was limited to what they thought they think we should get. But the Jewish immigrants, at the time, were giving the complete independence for their own education. Post 1948, our education was given to, like, from the West Bank, Jordan took responsibility of the Palestinian education, and for Gaza Strip, Egypt took responsibility for the education. And post 1967, Israel kept those curriculums, But it even included more, it even included censorships for Palestinian narrative. Even though the Palestinian narrative throughout these curriculums and education systems, it was absolutely limited. So it was further censored, further shut down. And in 1998, no wait, 19, sorry, the times, 1994, when the PLO came here, they started our own education, but the same censorship stayed, the same revising of the curriculum stayed. And so the Palestinians were kept through the education about knowing their roots, their history. Go on.
Now moving on to restriction, movement, and collective punishment. One of the few ways that Israel uses to punish us Palestinians for existing on this world is 700 checkpoints and roadblocks. And you have to realize that it's a very, very small country, so you're literally passing by these every day, especially for those who are moving from village to city and going to work or in school every day. And using the apartheid wall, harassment while going to school for those students and teachers living in Area C, and the military checkpoints even between countries that unfortunately we all have to go through because we don't have our own airport. So there's also, Israel decided to fragment us Palestinians even within each other, and we're divided into 4 parts: West Bank, Jerusalem, and the 48 territories, Gaza Strip, and the refugee camps, which play a very, very large role in the Palestinian territories themselves.
For the when these fragments and pieces were divided, their education systems were different between, the education provided for each fragment was different, but it all came back to the censorship. Each and every fragment, as I've said before, they had, Palestinian students had to go through. For Gaza Strip, it's known as one of the densely populated areas in the world. And you'd think that would be a huge obstacle for education for such an area, but it's not the only problem for them, because Israel put more limitation on restriction of movement, restriction of resources, and that created limited social mobility, limited educational availability. And this is not the only thing. With the constant and periodic attacks Israel puts the Gaza Strip under, like the war in 2014, where 1,700 Palestinians were killed. 500 of them were women and 300 were children. You'd think yes, Palestinian lives were lost, Palestinian families were lost, but that wasn't it for them. These numbers were not only the reason for the attacks. They wanted to attack also the infrastructure to further stop the process of living, the process of education, the process of being able to live a normal life. And so 233 academic institutions, like you see, were either damaged or completely destroyed. 10 hospitals were attacked, and furthermore utility buildings. And they just want to completely either eradicate us or stop us from the will to live. Stop our will to live.
Okay, unfortunately, as I said, the Palestinian territories are fragmented and even within Palestine. The West Bank is even divided into more sections, and then these sections consist of Area A, which is mainly controlled by Palestinian authorities, but of course, Israeli military can come in anytime they want because no one can stop them. There's Area B, which consists of villages such as Zir Debouan, Bitin, and many other villages near each other, and they're mainly surrounded by Israeli authorities. They can come in whenever they want also. An example of someone who was from Area B is a student from Birzeit University named Sajid Darwish, and he was just walking in his backyard in a village called Bitin, and unfortunately was randomly shot and instantly died. And he was, what year was he? Yeah, he was third year journalism. So yeah, he instantly died, and of course no one was charged. And their excuse for it was that he was in their territories, even though he was just walking behind his house. Continually, there's Area C. Area C goes through so many problems with just living. Area C consists mostly of Bedouins who unfortunately don't have any kind of identity because, as I said before, during the 1948 war, they went to areas that weren't recognized, so they weren't given any kind of identity, so they just like roam around in Palestine with nothing to do, and they're not allowed to graze the land, they're not allowed to make their own food, they're not allowed to, like, they can't, it's like, on top of not having their own identity, like living as a ghost, they're not allowed to even be like surviving. And unfortunately, those who live in Area C, have a hard time coming to class and going to school, especially teachers and students, because they're constantly harassed. And Area C also has curfews, so if, for example, someone was out after a curfew and an Israeli officer decided to shoot that person, their excuse is that you are going against the law, you're out of curfew, and it's not our problem because apparently that's the law. So unfortunately, this is like a daily thing for these kind of people. And also, what I wanted to add, that Area C, because of the lack of activity allowed for it, it potentially adds 61% of Palestinian finance. Like, it would contribute so much to Palestinian economy. But unfortunately, Israel knows this. Therefore, this is why they stop any kind of activity in this area. And yeah, so they want us to depend on their products. They don't want us to make our own factories. And this is one of the ways they make us dependent on them, so they know that you won't survive without us. Yeah, they want to give us laws where we can build ourselves. We have the minds, we have the hands for it, but unfortunately they just keep restricting more laws just so, because they know that we can, so they just keep stopping us in any way possible. They think of so many ways, unfortunately.
I would like to add to what Noor said, is that Area C consists of 66% of the West Bank, and this area is under complete control of the Israeli military and Israeli government, which gives them the right to build settlements inside the Palestinian territories and further taking more land from Palestinians. And they build their own roads. Like, as you see, these whole black spots are Israeli, completely Israeli controlled roads and settlements. And this further restricts movement between cities in the West Bank, restricts movement for people that are ready in their territories in law. I would also like to talk about Jerusalem, because I come from Jerusalem, and when you're speaking about Jerusalem, it's a city that is facing a huge ethnic cleansing. They want to completely remove the Palestinian identity from the city, so that they could claim it as their own, as their capital. And one of the ways they do it is through education. 100,000 Palestinian students are being educated in Jerusalem, are in schools, and 40% of them are in the Israeli administrated schools, so these are the public schools, and 44% of them are in the unrecognized but unofficial but recognized schools, which are by Palestinians, and the rest are in the private schools. And each and every sector of the part and sector of these schools have problems, but the main problem that faces all of these Palestinian students in these schools is the underfunding and under-education and the censorship they all have to go through.
Can you give some examples of the censorship?
One of the censorship, well, basically in Palestinian curriculum, in some schools like the unrecognized but official and the private schools, they use the Palestinian curriculum. But the Palestinian curriculum is revised by the Israeli government and then sent to these schools. And so any kind of historic leader like Yasser Arafat, all the information is taken about maps with Palestine in them, they're completely taken out. And that censorship does not stand there, because when you force the Israeli curriculum on their public schools in Jerusalem, when you use Zionist terminologies and Zionist propaganda to teach the Palestinian kids from when they are a young age, that Palestine basically is never mentioned and Israel is the land.
I heard that it was illegal to use the word Palestine, basically. Is that true in the schools?
Well, in which schools exactly?
I don't have distinctions.
Well, the thing is, like, most maps don't even recognize that there is a Palestine. So when you have history books here in the States, like I had a history book before from the States, it says Israel, and it's sad because it's coming into a country where, I mean, to people, students, Palestinian students, looking at the book, trying to learn from it. I took American history, so when I'm reading it, like, it's really sad. It's really sad that you have to look at your own map, your own familiar map, and you see the word Israel on it. So, and also an example by censorship, when we moved back, we had a picture of the map, and with the, you know, the Aqsa Mosque, and when it was shipped to the house, it was broken down. It was like a gun just went through it. And another example of censorship is some teachers and professors in Birzeit University have problems bringing in philosophy books, and sometimes have to download it through PDF, just because they want to teach their students certain things, but Israel's not allowing such a curriculum to our people.
And when you're talking about, like, we had a professor, we had a philosophy professor actually tell us she wanted to teach PhD courses, and the curriculum they were using for these courses didn't even have to do anything with politics, didn't even have anything to do with Israel, with any kind of occupation. It was just like about what are things, like how you could explain everything in life, and they denied that from getting in, and they had to fight hard to find any type of books in Arabic because they are teaching in Arabic. But coming back to what's happening in Jerusalem is that it's not only the censorship, it's as you see what Palestinian students have to go through when they're passing in, when they're studying in the city or around the city. The concentration of police, of the Israeli police, of the Israeli military, as you see, is so huge that you cannot walk one street without finding 3 or 4. And I had to go through that. But before, I was studying in a school that's in Beit Hanina, which is in the suburbs of Jerusalem. And in that school, we were only let till 9th grade because there was no permits to build further classes for students to stay in that school. And when we moved to the old city, where the school's other branch is, the whole environment, like when you're talking about education, you'd expect a friendly environment around you. But this wasn't present in the old city, because when you're leaving the school, you find a soldier staring at you. When you're getting to school, you find a soldier staring at you. And there's routinely done body harassments on students from the ages of 10 to 18. You're talking about school students. You're not talking about some kind of militias that are walking into these schools. And I was part of these body searches. I was walking back to home, walking out of school, and some soldier just comes in front of me and says, "Go to that room, I'm going to body search you," in Arabic. He's basically screaming. And when you're, as a 13-year-old kid, I just moved to that school. Out of fear, you just have to go and comply with what he said. But the thing is, after I went into that room, it was a small old bathroom. When he asked me, "Take all of your clothes," not like open your bag, not like he's searching me, which is basically like still not moral. He's telling me, "Take all of your clothes." And because I stared at him, and the thought went through my head, why am I supposed to do this? And I just stared back at him. I didn't. But imagine if it was a girl, if it was a boy, who out of fear did this, who took all of his clothes. What would you call it? I'll leave it to you. And this is consistent. This is not only one incident. They have the right to stop you if they want in the middle of the street and search you. If they want to take all of your clothes, they can do it, because their words are law against us. We can't do anything about that. But for the 48 territories, it's kind of sad, because those Palestinian communities were assimilated into their communities. They grew up in their communities. So the connection with them as Palestinians is certainly weak, which is sad, because firstly they'd have to grow up in Israeli schools. They'd have to learn full Israeli curriculum. They'd have to grow up as Israel, as it's their country. And when you grow up as that, you kind of lose connection with your roots. But it's not for everyone. I have a colleague on this tour that's from the 48 territories, and she fought back, but she fought back subtly, because she can't do anything in front of people about it. She didn't want to learn Hebrew. She didn't want to pass Israeli history to be able to study, but she had to. She fought for 2 years, trying to get a way out, but she couldn't. In the end, she was assimilated. She had to study that. She had to know their facts, their history. And when she was done from it, she had to wait 1 more year because she doesn't get their mandatory military service. And that's the story for Palestinians who are living in these territories. They'd have to wait 2 to 3 years. They'd have to waste 2 to 3 years of their education because either they serve or they waste their education.
So, is that like Nazareth?
It's like Nazareth. She's like my colleague. She's from Nazareth. She decided not to waste 3 years, but to actually try to find a way out of education. So she delayed her high school education, just trying to find a way not to like pass Hebrew. But in the end, she had to do it.
So Palestinians have to learn Hebrew?
They have to pass Hebrew in the Israeli curriculum, but not in the Palestinian curriculum.
If they're living in
Like,
In
the 48
Israel.
territories.
Okay, help me with the 48 territories.
So basically, they're the territories like Israel considered as theirs. The territories Israel considered as theirs, but there are a few number of Palestinians who stayed where they are. Like we're able to
So
stay.
they're in Israel,
yes.
technically, yeah. Pardon me for saying, but
Yeah.
yeah, okay, that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah, exactly. As a third generation internally displaced refugee, it's just right to give a little fact about refugee camps. I don't know if you all know what exactly refugees are, but technically they're those who are displaced from their homes. And there are 3 categories of refugees. The first are those who were displaced during the 1948 war. And the second are those who were displaced during the 1967 war, but for the first time. The third are those who weren't displaced in neither wars, but even like during the British Mandate. And these consist like internal and external refugees. And internal is as in like those who move from villages to cities or cities to other cities. And for those who move from villages to cities, you have to understand like how much they have to change in lifestyle in order to like be able to survive, because they're used to making their own food, they're used to growing their own vegetables, but then they have to move to the city even though it's not where they're actually from. And unfortunately there are a lot of cases like that, just like my family. To imprisonment. Imprisonment, unfortunately, there is a very high percentage of imprisonment of minors under the age of 18, and they take these children without any kind of conscience because they believe that these children are children of animals. So if they take them away now, if they kill them now, then they won't grow up to be resistant fighters. They won't grow up to be activists. So they believe that if they take them from as a young age, that it'll be easier for later on. And unfortunately, there are a lot of mothers in these prisons who end up having to give birth to their children in such a situation, and it affects greatly to like the psychological effect of the mother and the child when the child asks, "Where was I born?" Also, these children who are taken into prison may end up losing months of school or years. It always depends on them. And sometimes they're taken in, it's called idari, where they're taken in without charge. And it starts for the first 6 months for no charge. So they're just staying there waiting for a trial. And that's where they lose lots of education, and sometimes some children may end up growing older and may get out and believe that they're too old to be studying anymore, and may end up finding some random job where they can try to help support their families.
So here we were supposed to give you a little insight of our personal lives, but we kind of merged it, trying to like continue. So what we talk about now is what do we do as the right to education in Palestine do. We document, we research, we raise awareness about the cause of education and the Palestinian cause in general. We build an international campaign such as we're doing here in the tour. We provide legal representations for students whom are detained, for teachers, and for academic institutions. But what is the core is that through education we're trying to oppose this illegal occupation. But the most important thing of why we are here is because what we're asking for you, from you, to bring this, to bring our right to education back. We ask you to share our stories in your local communities, to spread awareness, and to certainly work to pressure this occupation into giving and to becoming, and I'm choosing the word, into becoming a democratic state. Because if that's what they call, then they should aim to do it. But other than that, there's still a settler colonialism that's taking us from our roots, that's taken many indigenous people's lives, whether through murder or whether through displacement. And so what you can do is basically stay in solidarity, and I think here a lot of you people are in solidarity, whether you're Palestinian, whether you're US, but we're asking you, for the people who are not, to spread our stories, to read more about us, to learn about our cause. And I tell you that it won't be hard for you to feel the truth, to feel the humanity of it. BDS is one way to put pressure on the occupation to stop what they're doing, whether it's academic, whether it's economic. But even though we're using BDS as a non-violent way to get our rights back, to pressure them into acting around us as humans, they're still saying that it's anti-Semitic to them, that this is hatred speech. So what I ask you is to stand by BDS, because it's hard times for it, and we need it as a way to pressure the occupation. It's a way for us. But if that doesn't fit your agenda, then boycott it. Simply boycotting is a way, because whether it's academic or education, academic or economic, is still putting pressure on this occupation. Thank you guys, and if you have questions, please. Sure.
I heard Ambassador Ross state that anyone who's for BDS is really against a two-state solution. What would you say to that?
I mean, for me personally, I'm not with a two-state solution. I'm with any number of states, because if that number or like 1 state, 2 state, 3 state, 4 state, 5 state, I don't care. If that number provides me my human rights back, to be able to live as an Israeli that is living in my land, I don't care, because I'm living in my land. He can live in the land, but he has to be equal. There will be laws that will give us our rights, our equal rights, and I won't be a second degree citizen, or I'll be an occupied citizen that has no right to come to his farmlands, who has to cross gates, who has to cross checkpoints. For me, just to be able to live a normal life, where I'm equal. I don't think like using BDS to get to that is stopping a two-state solution. If you think like if this two-state solution would give me my rights back, then I'd say like it's pushing it forward.
So we can reply to anyone saying that is not an official stance. That's just his opinion.
The
Would you say
BDS
that?
movement, one of the reasons the BDS movement was made was to pressure Israel to realize like what they're doing to us. Like when, for example, during the Gaza war, the Palestinian territories, even though we depend greatly, like a lot of people depend on their products because we're not allowed to make our own factories, not allowed to make our own things. So some people are forced to buy what is given to us. But during that war, we decided not to buy anything. And during that time, Israel had a really hard time economically. Unfortunately, the United States helped them at that time. But you have to understand that, like, just by boycotting certain things, it helps greatly for them to realize, like, the pressure from all around the world. So imagine if the whole world starts to boycott, then maybe Israel would wake up and realize what they're doing to the Palestinian territory and the people.
So are you suggesting we boycott anything at all that comes from Israel, or just things that are made in the occupied lands of West Bank?
Well, even if it was Palestinian, I don't think it would get to you.
No, but I think, like, to answer your question, when you, like, anything, well, can you repeat it, please?
Yeah, fine.
Can you repeat it? The question?
Oh, what should we boycott? Should we boycott everything that comes from Israel? Should we boycott only those things that we know come from the West Bank, the occupied territory?
Well, when you have certain companies that continuously support the occupation in continuing their discriminations and restrictions and building a better occupation, these kind of companies like HP, like G4S, like SodaStream is one example of the first like boycotting, but like you kind of have to boycott what's giving them support into continuing their occupation, because what is the aim of the BDS is to pressure them into stopping the occupation, and these companies are helping them continue their occupation. So
The BNC and Ramallah, paid staff like Omar Barbouki, who wrote the book BDS, they do have a well-researched and targeted list of, we have various degrees of boycott targets, and that is up to civil society around the U.S., coming from the Palestinian call in 2005 for the international community to choose which boycott targets work best or are most strategic for them. So obviously for some communities, HP isn't a wise choice, but now that we're gaining momentum and it's a national movement, we're this close with HP, especially after HP has split, now it makes sense for everybody. So, and the BNC helps guide internationally as a reference point for communities, academic institutions, local groups to kind of be referenced. So, and it's ongoing and absolutely consistent.
Is that somewhere on the internet? We can get it easily?
Yeah, so that is bds.org. That sounds way too simple for it to be that.
But yeah, it gives more information, or the SRP website.
There was
a question.
Yeah, could you talk a little bit about education programs within the West Bank that are maybe driven by Palestinians or outside door organizations that are working to educate women, like specifically in rural areas, that might not have had access to education maybe because of the problems from the occupation, or maybe it's like cultural expectations or financial issues?
Well,
Use the microphone.
well, most of the schools in the West Bank, like we said before, like we don't really focus on women, like as in like, no, like we don't restrict anything on women education-wise. Everyone gets their equal rights educationally. And for example, Birzeit University has more women than men.
Right, legally, there's no restrictions on women, but culturally, there might be some restrictions, or like financially, there might be some. But specifically, I'm talking about like, you know, both of you guys both come from cities. You're from Jerusalem, you're from, I forgot which city that you're from.
I live in Ramona.
So, it's more of a privileged demographic in a way that you have that kind of access. But if you're talking about women that are coming from like a poorer village or something like that, you know, it's harder for them to get to, for example, Birzeit University, or to afford it, or transportation-wise, you know. So could you talk about like if there are any programs that are working there that are trying to get that education out to them?
I can give you some examples from my father's village. It's a small village, about like 500, I don't know how to call it, Nasamin, I don't know, like...
500 people live.
Like 500 people living there, and...
What's the name of the village?
Betzerik. I think there are more now, but I don't know. I don't like follow the demo. But basically what happened is there was a huge development from organizations like Europe's Society or something. I forgot, like I don't know the name exactly, but they created a community for women to work, and that was the first step. You know, they started selling tatris, embroidery, and they started working on their own projects. Like now we have salons, we have kindergartens, were completely projects of these women. They found the funding, they started it, and so like in our community there are problems. There certainly are problems when it comes to gender equality, but we're also certainly finding ways and getting help into developing, but the occupation is also certainly not helping us into advancing too much. I hope.
But I want to add, the reasons why, I'm forgetting, I'm sorry. The reasons why many students can't afford, for example, to go to Birzeit University is because the government has a hard time, like, giving, like, scholarships and all that, because our government has no money to give itself. So when you have a government that doesn't have money to support itself or its people, of course the university is going to have higher tuitions and higher, like it gets harder and harder. So people end up thinking like, how am I supposed to be educated if I don't have the money for it? So if you look at it deeply, then it comes from the occupation, because our government has nothing.
I'd like to say first, thank you for passing our message, Palestinian message. I'm really so proud of you guys. I'm a visitor here. Actually, I'm from Ramallah. I'm a village related for Ramallah. I'm really so proud of you. I was like listening to you guys. I'm really so proud of you.